I'm Daniel Penny, and you're listening to Non-Toxic, a podcast where we connect the dots between the manosphere and the atmosphere. It's been a long time, Andrew.
Yes.
Well, I'm very glad to welcome you back for this bonus episode of Non-Toxic. I thought maybe we could start by you just catching the people up on what you've been doing.
Yeah. I have been busy in all sorts of different ways. Probably the two most significant things are both oceans related, which seems to be a beat of mine in the last couple of years. The first is a story that I just completed for Bloomberg to be published soon about red king crabs and the crazy money that Norwegian fishermen are making right now, thanks to climate change and Vladimir Putin. I'll leave it at that on that one. And then I am still, as listeners might remember, working on the whale beat, and I'm working on a really long piece about the wild ride that last year was for the offshore wind industry in the United States. There was a couple high profile collapses in the industry, and things really got turned upside down in the supply chain. And of course, there was all the drama from the oppositional groups, the people who were opposed to offshore wind at all costs. And all that is it all kind of coalesced into sort of one big horrible year for offshore wind.
So we are going to get to hear about the dead whales and the offshore wind conspiracies.
Yeah, I will talk one day about this, I promise.
Oh, good. I'm really looking forward to seeing both these articles in print, as I think will our readers. I thought, yeah, we could just, if you're ready, maybe we could dive into the questions. We've got 4 queued up. I figure I'll just share them, and then we can go from there. This question is from Laird in Providence, Rhode Island.
Hi, Non-Toxic. I need some help. After watching the Netflix show Drive to Survive, my brother-in-law became obsessed with F1. He subscribes to the F1 streaming platform, watches all 3 days of each Grand Prix, of course, reads F1 news, buys merch, and fawns over the personalities. Now, every time I go upstate for weekend family gatherings, he's up early in the mornings watching it on the TV. Hours of engines revving and tires screeching, comments about Danny Rick and Charles Leclerc. I can't think of a more toxic sport than F1 for all the reasons I do not need to enumerate to you folks. How do I save him? Why have I been unable to get him into real sports like basketball? He's taken to F1, the apotheosis of sports washing. It's completely uneventful, basically an OPEC project, and headlined by boorish, entitled princely manlets with thick necks. What can I do?
Okay. Laird, thank you for that question. Yeah, I've never really been someone who's interested in race cars of any kind. I've always found them kind of stupid, I'm not going to lie. As an American, F1 was never really on my radar. I always thought of NASCAR, but now, of course, F1 is by far the dominant auto sport that has taken over the US with that show, Drive to Survive. And yeah, it is an incredibly carbon intensive sport. According to F1's 2019 sustainability report, when it first announced 2030 net zero emissions targets back then, and in 2019, it emitted just over 250,000 tons of CO2. We were literally watching oil get burnt as cars zip around the track. I think there are a few options. If Formula One is like his heroin, maybe you need to get him onto methadone. And I would suggest that you try to push your brother-in-law into Formula E, which is the exact same format as Formula One, except it's with electric cars. You're probably not going to break his addiction to cars zooming around a track endlessly, but what if instead of running on gasoline, they were electric? What do you think, Andrew?
Yes. First of all, I agree with all that you've said, Danny. I would just say this seems to open the door for a question about how to replicate the revving sound of the engines, because that could be one of the addictive qualities that that could be your Laird, your brother's issue here is the trigger. So seek out and encourage anyone who's investing in good tech that can replicate the great revving sound of burning petroleum. So I come to this question with, I think, some positive news, actually. There are some alternatives out there, Laird, that maybe you can introduce to your brother. I'm not sure if they're all on Netflix, but there's a series called Make or Break about pro tennis. And then, sorry, Make or Break is a series about professional surfing on Netflix. And then Break Point is a pro tennis version. And they're all sort of offshoots of Drive to Survive, because apparently that show is an enormous hit. So I would just encourage your brother to check those out, because they're very similar in the way they're structured and the way that they follow a specific athlete for each episode. And of course, tennis and surfing are slightly better for the environment. Lots of flying around the planet in jets. So I'm not gonna lie, there's issues with it all. But at least this is, this is people out in the ocean, doing physically strenuous things or on a court, not just thick-necked manlets racing around fancy rich cities like Monaco.
Okay. Laird, there you have it. You've got two options, Formula E or just get him into another athletic soap opera docuseries that follows a different sport entirely. And hopefully one of those two tracks will be successful in diverting your brother-in-law. Up next, we've got Amir in Berkeley.
As a lab scientist who works in a molecular biology lab, I use a lot of disposable plastics. How do I reconcile my concern with the climate with the job that I love but negatively impacts the environment?
Okay. Yeah, I think this is a question that a lot of people face, whether they're scientists or in any number of other fields, how much impact your job has. Andrew, you want to start?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the question, Amir. This is a great question, and it's not an issue that's isolated just to you or your job, right? This is something that people who are increasingly concerned about plastic pollution and microplastics, no matter what they do, they're thinking about this more and more every day, because of course, everything around us is plastic. I think in science, I think there's a different way to think about this. What you're doing in the lab, plastic benefits greatly. Plastic has been a huge help to science. And, there's no reality in which we live where there is no plastic at all. I think another way to think about this is reducing the plastics that can be eliminated in our lives around us. So, maybe some of the test tubes you're using and other items, they're plastic, but there are so many other single-use things in the world around you that you can cut out, whether that's like plastic utensils, plastic plates, buying bottled water at the store.
Which is full of plastic.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just the bottle you're holding. It's actually in the water. And we should say, by the way, that, the news is focused on bottled water, but anything bottled in plastic is going to have microplastics in it. So that's, anything you're looking at in the refrigerator at the store. So I'm saying, there's another way to look at this, in that cut out the plastics in your peripheral life that can be cut out, and encourage others to do the same. And that way, you're still reducing the amount of plastic that's entering the environment. And no, it's not a panacea. It's not going to fix the problem that we've created, but at least, it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I think building on what you're saying, Andrew, there are kind of two lines of thought with this question that a lot of people have around whatever it is that they do with their job and how it may interact with the climate crisis. I think on the one hand, you've got the kind of effective altruism, 80,000 hours utilitarian crowd who would say basically like it doesn't really matter what you do in your job as long as you're just like maximizing the amount of money that you're making and then donating that money in the most effective manner possible to the issues that are most pressing and kind of most capable of being changed through that money. If climate was your thing, then you could say, yeah, I'm going to go, I don't know, take whatever job, go work at BP if you want, and then, donate all your salary to Greenpeace. I don't really buy that line of thinking just because it seems like it would create such a level of cognitive dissonance that no person with any kind of like inner life could survive. But there's like a whole school of thought that promotes this idea. I think a lot of people want their job and as to align with their values in some way. And that doesn't mean it has to be like a 100% alignment, but if you're someone who cares about climate, like you don't want to feel like whatever you're doing is actively making the thing worse. I think maybe Amir that you're giving yourself too hard a time here. I'm kind of with Andrew on this. Like I know that you're not a geologist trying to figure out like the best way to frack the new shale that's been discovered. And the work you're doing is like to better humanity. And the plastic that's produced is going to be kind of incidental to that. I know that there are scientists out there who are working with their labs to optimize and reduce the amount of plastic that they're using and to use more glass wherever possible. And, it is, I think, it is possible to work with your colleagues and have that discussion. So I think the first step would be to try to connect with other folks who are concerned about this issue. And I mean, the fact that you're based in Berkeley, I have a feeling that you won't have a hard time finding them. All right. Thank you, Amir. Now we're going to hear from our friend Brian.
Hey, Daniel and Andrew. This is Brian calling from just outside Philadelphia. So I've been thinking a lot about AI, artificial intelligence, and its impact on the climate. And what I'm hearing, what I'm reading in the conversation about AI is concern about this prospect of the technology getting out of our hands and androids rising up and becoming our overlords. I guess you could call that the Terminator scenario. Well, I think that's a interesting and sometimes fun debate. I think the headline should be the huge output of energy that AI requires and the fact that we're already using too much energy as it is. So for those of us who want to be non-toxic, I would think that this technology would be a non-starter, but I could be wrong. And also, maybe it's already too late because AI already seems to be pretty well established. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. And I also just want to say great job on another season of Non-Toxic.
Okay. Brian's asking us about AI. So first, I'm going to admit that I'm not an AI expert, but my friend Carrie McInerney, who has the podcast The Good Robot, is an expert in AI. She's a friend from Cambridge, and she's a scholar of gender and women's studies, and she has kind of taken that and applied it to AI and become, I think, one of the like leading young voices in kind of critical AI studies. But we will do our best to answer your question from really just a climate perspective. I think if you don't mind me starting us off, the AI question is really up in the air right now when it comes to climate. I know that I've seen some stories about, for example, AI being used along with satellites to help identify things like methane leaks. That seems like a great potential use of AI. But on the other hand, I know that energy demands from AI are skyrocketing. I was reading something that basically the energy that it takes to produce a single like generative image in a program like Midjourney is the same amount of energy that it takes to charge your iPhone. So not even just like how much energy has gone into kind of the computation to make the AI model effective, but just like hitting that, button when you're playing on the computer, like that costs an iPhone's worth of energy. And according to one recently published academic study, by 2027, AI servers could use between 85 to 134 terawatt hours annually, which is similar to what Argentina, the Netherlands, and Sweden each use in a year. And just to there are a few more stats out there. Global demand for electricity grew 2.2% in 2023, according to the International Energy Agency. And over the next 3 years, 2024 to 2026, the need for electricity is expected to grow annually about 3.4%. So that's a lot. And it's like, for every bit of energy that we save with, improving our infrastructure or, adding more solar and more renewables to the grid, it's like if we just like gobble it all up, then it just defeats the purpose. So yeah, I think, I don't want to sound like a degrowther, though I maybe am kind of a closet degrowther, but yeah, we cannot do the green transition fast enough to keep up with the demand. I kind of feel like probably the costs outweigh the benefits, but I'm going to hand it over to Andrew. And what do you think, Andrew?
I suppose I'm a closet degrowther as well in certain things, but I'm also, a realist and know that the vast majority of us are not, and things are going to continue to grow. So it's like we have to emphasize efficiency, in any way possible. We have to make all things that require energy more efficient. And also, thank you for complimenting us, Brian. I appreciate you listening to the pod, listening to Danny this season, of course. And to your point, Brian, about server farms, I think about these all the time. Danny, as you know, I was just in Iceland and Norway. And Iceland in particular, I was speaking to someone there who kind of works in government policy. And there's a huge concern over there about increasing interest from mainly the US to build server farms there because the temperature, it's cold, and that's really great for these places. I just constantly worry about, more and more server farms going up elsewhere. Yeah. And like, if there's so much thinking and human energy being spent on advancing AI, then I would hope that there is someone in some corner of this tech world thinking about how to, reduce energy input.
All right, we got one last question. This one is from Greg in Amsterdam.
Hey, Daniel, this is Greg Rosborough calling in from Amsterdam, also live in New York. Just want to say first, amazing season 2. Congratulations. You opened my mind to so many new ideas and individuals I wouldn't have heard from or their perspectives otherwise. I just wanted to say thank you for that. My question, sort of a broad question to end season 2, is how as an individual do we see the world more clearly again? And I guess what I'm asking is, how do we see the world not only through, biased and politicized and toxic general social media and media, and sort of the anger that seems to permeate the world today? I mean, it comes across, when you open up your phone or the news, everyone's arguing about everything. Everyone feels victimized by someone else. Everyone's just, there's anger. And it's like, how do we rise above that, give ourselves a bit of a clearer perspective to see things for what they are, gain an independent perspective of our own, and sort of cut through that noise? And I think, this show, of course, relates to like sustainability in a way, and what maybe we should just start referring to as, general human responsibility. But it basically boils down to like having some respect for your fellow human beings, having some respect for your fellow creatures of the world, be that dogs, trees, whales, fish, worms, etc., and having some respect for this planet that we all inhabit. And one thing I've just noticed over the course of my lifetime is that, like with anything, sometimes in relationships, sometimes where we live, the things we have, we start to take things for granted. We don't appreciate what's right in front of us. And I think sometimes that's one of our own worst traits as a species, that we always want more and we always want new. But so I was asking myself this question last year. How do I see the world more clearly? I turned 40. That's a whole nother story. But anyway, I was wondering, how do we lift this veil of not appreciating things that we have? And, I said, I'm in the Netherlands. There is a ton of these sort of psilocybin or generally mushroom retreats here available in this country. I think it's maybe one of the only places in the world that it's legal. And they're usually like 2 or 3 day retreats, very calm, very ceremonial, nice trained professionals that are administering the mushrooms and everything like that. Of course, they're organically grown in the Netherlands, etc. But one takeaway I had from it, amongst many takeaways, was in the 6 to 8 weeks following the retreat, there was kind of this halo effect in my mind where seeing mountains, could make me catch my breath. Seeing sunrises would bring tears to my eyes. Music would bring energy into my soul like never before. I just had a newfound empathy for everything, for the world, for people, for animals, for, yeah, just I felt like I could see things more clearly than I had in a very long time. It was super refreshing. So I want to ask if you have other ideas on how to do that. And, I think maybe that should be part of all of our lives. We're raised in a society that's super competitive, or in a world that's super competitive and capitalistic, and requires us to be competitive and compete with each other for resources. And yet the world now requires us to have a more compassionate point of view, to not be toxic, to not be against each other all the time, to find solutions together. I think that's the way forward. So anyway, but wanted to ask if you have other solutions that or you've come across, or things or ideas were in your mind this year of how to see the world more clearly again and help each of us to have an independent, fairer, more respectful perspective on the world. Thanks, and good luck for season 3.
All right, Greg, thank you. So yeah, where do we even start with that one? I think, Andrew, since you're 40, right? You turned 40 yet?
I just turned 42, actually, last week.
You just turned 42.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Happy belated. I'm gonna pass the mic to you on this one, since you can speak to the midlife crisis maybe better.
I love this question. I think there's a bit of an answer in Greg's story and his experience. I think about this a lot. This increasingly competitive nature among humans, especially Americans, this inability to empathize with people you don't know. And one of the major problems for American youth compared to youth in other countries is that we're not exposed to other cultures and countries. We're not encouraged to venture out. There are far less resources to allow those of us who, don't have a bunch of family money that can just send you on a lad's trip around the world. And I think we need to emphasize in both our social settings within our families, but also in our systems, this ability, this effort to send younger people abroad to other places and experience other cultures. Because as soon as you're exposed to people in other places that live different ways, you can't help but empathize. So I love Greg's experience, because I think whether he recognizes it or not, but just getting out of your bubble. Everyone just needs to get out and go to other places and see how other people live and hear their opinions.
I was thinking a bit more about the kind of maintaining that sense of wonder that Greg was talking about after he did his mushroom trip. And I do think that the natural world is very unique in that way. Like, if you take the time to appreciate it. I live in Cambridge, as you know, which is not exactly the most sublime place when it comes to nature. It's very flat, it's very tranquil, but it is beautiful. And I've definitely come to appreciate that beauty. Yesterday, actually, I took a long walk with a friend of mine through this meadow along the River Cam and, just like under the willows and along the path, I guess sometimes used to graze some cows nearby. It was wet at various times. It was sunny. It was, it was typical English weather, but it was amazing. Like it smelled so good. And that scone at the end of the walk was all the better for it. And, this friend of mine is leaving Cambridge in a week. So I felt like I was kind of seeing everything through his eyes and, he's not going to experience that very much anymore. It's not going to be a regular part of his life. And I do think that that kind of imaginative leap was important, that I wasn't thinking about it from my own perspective, but from his. And that helped me kind of appreciate what I had in my own life and kind of what I was experiencing in that moment in a different way. So yeah, I'm vibing with everything that you're talking about, Greg.
Thank you, Greg.
Well, to decide who wins the non-toxic t-shirt, I thought instead of Andrew and I being the ones to just kind of make a decision arbitrarily, we don't want people to think that the fix was in. So instead, we are going to put out a poll for our readers to decide who had the best question, and the winner of that poll will receive a free non-toxic t-shirt. We'd like to thank everybody who sent in their questions. We'd also like to thank Blue Corn Candles, our sponsor for season 2. They hooked us up with some great candles. And lastly, we'd like to thank our listeners who have been following along with everything we've been doing. Andrew is going to tell you a little bit about another bonus episode in the works, which you should stay tuned for in the coming weeks. Andrew?
Yeah, so we have something kind of special happening in my neck of the woods coming up in 2 weeks. It's the Society of Environmental Journalists Conference in Philadelphia. So I am, along with leading a tour around the Delaware Bay Shore, where I grew up and wrote a book on a few years ago. I am just going to be roving around the conference, sitting down, talking to people about their thoughts about the manosphere, climate change. I have no idea who I'm going to talk to. I'm just going to kind of pick out a few folks, a few voices, and sit down and have a chat. So it's exciting to get out in the field. That's something that both Danny and I, love to do as much as we can. You can't always report from the field for every story or project these days. So it'll be exciting to be out there on foot and sort of door knocking for some unique perspectives on non-toxic.
Okay, so stay tuned. And that's it for this bonus episode. We'll be putting out more information about future bonus episodes and what we've got in store for season 3. For now, you can check out our archive, season 1 and season 2. There are 21 episodes before this one for you to listen to if you haven't listened to them all. So please enjoy those. They're, as we like to say in the business, evergreen. Non-Toxic was produced by Loose Thread Studios with help from our producer, Andrew. It was great to have him back on the show this episode. Music is by Nathan Sharp, and our art is by Sam Creasy. You can support Non-Toxic by going to patreon.com/nontoxicpodcast, where you can sign up to become a sustaining member and keep this operation going. Thanks again for listening, and stay tuned for another bonus episode of season 2 of Non-Toxic.